Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon if you're further in the Midwest or West Coast. Um, Thank you so much for attending this Black Women in Clinical Research event. It happens monthly. This is our monthly event for April where we do a career talk and bring you the women, Black women in the industry who are going to be able to give us this knowledge and breadth of information that we need about so many other roles that we don't think of when we think about clinical research. So I'm going to stop talking because I talk a lot. I'm your co-host, Tiffany. I'm going to let my co-host with me, Courtney, introduce herself, and then we're going to let our speaker of the evening introduce herself. So Courtney, take it away.
Thank you, Tiffany. I am Courtney. I am your resident co-host for our monthly career events. I'm so glad to be here again with Tiffany and be here with Dr. Grove for our communications talk this month. I am a CRA1 with PPD, part of Thermo Fisher, and a active member of Black Women in Clinical Research. So if you ever need anything from me, you find me on LinkedIn, you find me in Microsoft Teams, just hit me up and I will respond as best and as quickly as I can. And if I can't get you an answer, I'll find it. That's that. So thank you for being with us.
Courtney is my girl, absolutely. Okay, yes, you can find all of us on LinkedIn. And while you're doing this this evening, please feel free to drop your LinkedIn too. I want you to communicate in the chat and get to know each other because we're all here to support each other. Without further ado, before we go into the talk, I would like to introduce Dr. Tamara Rahim Grow, who is going to be speaking with us this evening. And so, Dr. Grow, just kind of give us a brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll jump right into it.
Yes, and Tiffany, Courtney, Danielle, thank you very much to the whole group for inviting me. This is a pleasure and a joy. So I'm Dr. Tamara Grow, and I've been in medical communications for about 17 years, and actually started after doing my PhD at Temple and a few postdocs at Temple. And originally, I am from the Caribbean. I'm from a small island called Trinidad and Tobago, and I came came to the United States to do my bachelor's and then my master's, and then moved over from New York to Philadelphia to actually do my PhD. And I stayed in Philadelphia. And yes, and I love Carnival and miss it a lot. So it's great to be here and to actually share the journey. I have really grown up a lot over the years in medical communications. So I'm just happy to share that journey with you and what it means to be a medical writer, to be in this field, and to understand what you're doing now. And if there's any information that I can give to you to help you to understand the field better, definitely just interrupt me, ask any questions, and feel free to jump in. So I did put together some slides because I have presented on this topic in the past, and I thought I do want to bring back some of these concepts to you because I think it would be helpful, because I don't think too many people may have an understanding of what is medical communications. Okay. So with that, we'll kick off. And just next slide, please. Okay, and there's a you can hit next again. There's a red mark. Oh, not one back. Okay, great. So when I was doing my PhD, and of course you want to know what to do next as an alternative career, and a few people recommended going into medical communications. I did not know what that is, and so you look at different associations. You have the NPA, which is the National Postdoctoral Association, that you can go to, and there are recommendations for alternative careers, including scientific writing. And so it's great when you look at this list. Now, I don't see CRA or clinical research on there, so we might need to improve this list. But it was a good starting point for me. And then I did a lot of research to understand what is scientific writing and medical communications. But also, I had a young family at the time, and it was difficult to survive in research. So I chose this as a career. I didn't know if this would be a good career and what this actually meant. And So I jumped into this career and really tried to embrace it, to understand. Next slide, please. And so what does it mean then to be doing medical communications? And most of you might be familiar with this drug development process from beginning to end. It takes many, many years. As you can see, drug discovery, preclinical research, you're going through all these clinical trials. You have to do phase 1 up to phase 4, and then this drug gets approved. So a company is investing a lot of money into a particular drug and doing all of these various studies. And so strategic and tactical medical communications are needed to educate clinicians about that particular drug, about that clinical data. They need to understand the clinical value of a drug, because the only people who know about the drug when it's being studied are the investigators. No one else knows about it unless you publish the data from that clinical trial, or you educate physicians about a new potential drug that is going to come to the market. And this gave sort of rise to the field of medical communications. And I hope you can appreciate the breadth of potential communications that come out of supporting this entire process throughout that drug development process. And I'll go into more detail, and stop me if you have any questions. Okay, so next slide. So along the way, and this is another way of showing this, you have preclinical studies and drug discovery. You know, we're in the lab. I did my PhD, you're in the lab, you're doing your postdoctoral research, but there's clinical development. And so we're going through all these different phases, and each of these different phases relies on different teams at the pharmaceutical company. So very early on in phase 1 and phase 2, you have publications teams, scientific communications, they might be called. You have medical affairs teams. And then as you progress to phase 3 and beyond, you have marketing and commercial teams, market access, and maybe some medical still involved, but tends to be more marketing because the drug is going to be approved and in the market. So you are familiar with clinical trials. You're doing clinical trial, you're involved, you might know early stages of the trial and then regulatory approval. But a lot of medical communications is happening between phase 1 and phase 4, and even sometimes beyond. So, and that leads into the next slide. So between phases 1 to 3, the medical teams at the pharmaceutical company, they want to communicate with physicians on a scientific level. You're talking about the clinical data, they're running the clinical trials, there's a lot of data, you know, oncology drugs, new neurology drugs. They want to discuss important clinical questions, and then they want to develop a clinical and scientific program. So what clinical trials are you running and why? What endpoints are you studying? And that's an entire program that I know we're probably all familiar with, but that is the focus in phases 1 to 3. Now, when you launch, you're working with the marketing teams. And so now you are developing promotional messaging. You want this drug to be, it's now on the market, approved. You want it to be used. You want doctors to know about it, and you want it to be sold. And so you have to develop resources for physicians to be trained on the approved use of the drug. Before approval, when you're running clinical trials, you're testing all different options. Maybe it can help in certain cancer types, but then it gets approved for one cancer type. So when it's approved, you can only train physicians on that one particular indication that the drug is approved for. And then you want to educate physicians. So who is going to develop those communication materials to help the company communicate with physicians in phases 1 to 3, and then from launch and beyond? That is the medical writer in medical communications. Do we have somebody coming on board? Let them come in. No. Okay. So So keep this in mind, and if we just had someone come on board to think of, you have different phases in the drug development process, different objectives during those different phases and how you communicate with physicians. Because when you think of, you're going through all of the trouble of doing clinical trial, you want that drug to be taken up when it's made and finally approved. Okay, so next slide, please. So medical teams, they have different outputs. They want to do publications. They have to publish. They might do a review article on the use of this particular type of drug to treat this particular cancer type. They want to set the stage for the importance of this drug. They might do advisory board meetings to come together with physicians and get their input on this drug. Is this clinical data looking good? Should we do more clinical trials? Then they will train their MSLs. And so all of that is the focus of the medical team. And then marketing teams are now going to be training the sales reps and making sure we have print and television ads and the right branding and the look and feel. And there's wargaming to know how we can actually differentiate ourselves versus the competitor. And so there are lots of different objectives that a company has in all of these different phases, and they are doing different things. So publications are important. You want to publish the clinical trials, but then it's equally important when the drug is improved to make sure a sales rep knows how to talk about this particular drug. Now, the pharmaceutical company doesn't have enough people to develop all of these different outputs. You need to have expertise in all of these different areas to do that. And so this is the reason why medical communications has grown over the years as a field. So next slide, please. Tiffany, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were getting all the notifications, so I'm going to fix something really quick. So give me 1 second. So you won't be getting those notifications, and I will be right back. So
Sure.
let's see here. Give me 1 second.
Maybe I can pause and say, does anyone have any questions so
Sure.
far? Good. Hopefully this is making sense to you in the importance of medical communications.
All right. All right. Well, if you don't have any questions, I was quick. I'm quick with it.
Yes.
So I'm going to get back to the slides and I'll let you continue. But so far, I'm very enthralled, and I had my camera on, so you can tell that I was really enthralled. But I'm going to turn it off now to let you continue on.
You're very convincing, Tiffany. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So medical communications is a field. It has grown in the past 30 years almost to focus on writing these different scientific documents. So you can write a publication or a review manuscript. You can educate about the drug. You can create digital content for websites, health-related magazines, news articles. And the scientific information, it needs to be targeted to a specific audience. That could be a physician, it could be a nurse, it could be market access, it could be patients. So depending on the audience, you need to have someone who's able to interpret that clinical data and know how to tell that story to that different audience. So medical writers, they require a strong understanding of medical concepts and terminology. They are not only reading in an area that they were trained in, maybe from a PhD or PharmD or MD. They might be doing an area they've never been exposed to. So they have to really be able to understand those concepts and be able then to collate that information, to be able to present it back, and to be able to work with physicians and communicate effectively. So I'm putting really concise requirements, but I will expand on this moving forward. Okay, next slide. So again, this field of medical communications grew within the last, I would say, 30 plus years, because pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies, they don't have the staff to develop these publications or interact with thought leaders. They did in years gone by, but they outsourced those responsibilities. And this is how MedCom agencies actually grew. And they need those scientific documents. If a drug is going to be approved, they need to show that they have actually published, that they had clinical data, whether it's negative or positive. It needs to be published, and sponsors have to publish. This is pharma guidelines within 12 to 18 months after completion of the trial. So how do you keep up with, if you have multiple clinical trials, multiple drugs being studied, you have a robust pipeline, and that's one company, how do you keep up with that publishing? In addition to that, you had the growth of CROs and MedCom agencies in general over the last few decades. There's that increasing demand for web content for medical professionals and patients. Everyone wants to understand this potential drug. Could it help me in my particular disease? And they need to get that information. And then pharmaceutical companies now want flexible resourcing models. So they want medical writers or MedCom employees to work with them almost as consultants. So there is a growing need for individuals who have this strong scientific and academic background who can apply their skills to medical communications. All right, next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit more now, and I don't have a lot of slides. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. So when you are coming into a medical communications agency, you're working as part of a team. Maybe you've done your PhD, your PharmD, your MD, an advanced degree, and you were working in a lab, you were working on your individual project. Maybe as a postdoc, you were working together and mentoring others. But this is a team-oriented environment. And so you have to get used to having a constant flow of creative ideas. You're working together as a team and building on the strong knowledge of the client you're working with. You're working with different companies, big and small, the industry that they are trying to produce this drug for, and then whatever cutting edge development they are doing. And be able to communicate openly. If you are working towards a deadline, it's not just your deadline, you're part of a team. So you have to communicate openly and then understand how to work efficiently. There are standard operating procedures you need to follow to meet internal and external deadlines, and you need to know how to follow all of those procedures, and then at the same time be able to maintain strong relationships with clients and with physicians. So this is why the scientific background is so important, because there are times, and I've seen this in the past, where medical writers are actually almost speaking one-on-one with that physician, and they're understanding the same terms. Of course, they're not true experts, but they're very close to it because they have used all the skills from their PhD, PharmD, MD to help them to get up to speed quickly and to be able to communicate effectively about a topic. Next slide. So what are the characteristics then of a good medical writer? And at the heart of it, it's being able to quickly understand and interpret that scientific data, right? But you also need to have these soft skills. So the hard and soft skills are important in this role, where you are goal focused, you are organized, you're accurate, attention to detail. You can work well under pressure because there are times when it's going to be challenging, and you need to be flexible. So again, those communication skills, written and verbal, are going to be very important. So all of those skills tend to be developed along the way throughout your academic training, but they are definitely enhanced as you enter into medical communications and continue to grow as an individual. So next slide, please. So what do they do? And the main responsibility of that medical writer, and there are different roles in medical communications, but I'm focusing on the medical writer, is not sure why that changed, but to translate science into the clinical benefit by developing evidence-based content that is of the highest editorial quality. So not only are you understanding the clinical data, you know this clinical trial that's being run, you know the series of clinical trials, you understand all the different endpoints. When you put this into a story, it's got to be clean, it's got to be concise and clear, it's got to be medically accurate, and you have to meet the client's strategic objectives. And what do we mean by that? So if this particular drug is the first in class in whatever area, oncology, neurology, you're going to want to say this is first in class. And you have to highlight that in your story, in the piece that you are writing. And again, it's of the highest quality. And clients are going to expect, clients being the pharmaceutical company or the biotech company, they're going to expect that any medical writer has all of that understanding as the foundation of their writing. They know the purpose of the drug, the mechanism of the action, all the clinical trials, what is the strategic objective, the communication objectives, how to communicate. That is at the foundation of their writing skills. And so working as a team, they will work together to make sure this particular output is done. So if it's a publication, they're going to develop a first draft, a second draft. They're going to work with someone who's helping them to get permissions from a journal. If they are repurposing a figure, they're going to work with internal art directors and editors to make sure this is looking clean and high quality as a document. And then they need to go through medical, legal, regulatory review at the pharmaceutical company. And they will attend those meetings and answer questions and then be able to help to finalize that output. So there's a lot of responsibility of the medical writer within the world of medical communications to make sure that what they're working on is really of the highest quality, even though they are not the true expert. So, and I'll go on to explain this a little bit further. So there are other activities. So depending on the type of content, now think again, at a pharmaceutical company, you have a medical team early on in phases 1 to 3. You have a commercial team in phases 3 and beyond. So the types of materials they're working on can be different. And so early on, when you're doing manuscripts, publications from the clinical data, you have primary manuscripts and review articles, and you might even be working on a therapeutic guideline because you have this new data. But you can also be working on slides. You're doing a lot of slide deck content, sometimes from scratch. I mean, you're coming up with that content and the visual. You're thinking about how to bring that information to life. You might be supporting meetings with a client on site, doing research for them, meeting thought leaders. You are an extension of the pharmaceutical company, so you're present at meetings sometimes to support them. Or you may be involved in strategic planning. So you're not actually doing the output or the tactic, but you can help a pharmaceutical company to think of what should be done first to create the most awareness about this particular product. You want to go to this particular Congress today and this other Congress, which is not as big, maybe in a year from now. And so to help them to think about what's the best opportunity for them strategically. You may be working with a graphics team and helping to bring an image to life. So there's a certain amount of visual storytelling to this. And then you're traveling to congresses and meetings. It's not a high amount of travel, but it's roughly between anywhere from 0 to 20% of time, depending on the type of work that you are doing. So what to expect as a medical writer? You'll be challenged, particularly to showcase your critical thinking abilities, to communicate the science. It's going to go far beyond anything you did in your academic training. And there is pressure in the industry for individuals who can be innovative and strategic. So typically, and I see this when young writers, they've done a PhD, MD, PharmD, some advanced training, they come into the field and they're getting used to the particular position. They may not be thinking strategically, meaning they don't know why this pharmaceutical company invested in this drug to begin with, or how does this drug fit into the pipeline of products that they have, or why do they want to publish this paper now instead of a year from now? And so understanding that strategic thinking is important because it helps you to really start communicating with the client and building a strong partnership. And then your writing becomes stronger. And then you work as a team. So you have to understand that the team is greater than the sum of its parts. You have to understand how to work as a team. And here's another piece of this puzzle. There is a financial component to this. You previously worked maybe in a lab and you did an experiment on your own time, or you were traveling on your own time. Now you're doing everything on behalf of a pharmaceutical company. And so your time is important. The company has paid you as an agency to develop these materials. So they're giving you a certain amount of time to do this within. So you need to manage your time. And if you do that within a certain amount of time that is expected, you do it efficiently, and then you help your team to be financially successful. Otherwise, you may need to spend more time. You need to go back and ask for more money to cover your time. And you can think of it as a lawyer. You know, lawyers get charged every 15 minutes of their time. It is every 15 minutes that you're spending on a particular task accounts for that money. It's coming from that money that was paid for that particular output to be done. So writers who learn how to be knowledgeable and efficient are going to be successful in the field. So next slide. There are challenges coming from academia. And when I wrote this, I really was thinking of a lot of the challenges I've seen with university students coming straight into MedCom, where it is fast-paced and publications in general might not be as fast-paced as working on slide deck material for marketing teams. There's still a pace to it where you still need to understand how to multitask and prioritize and meet tight deadlines, be flexible. Sometimes deadlines, priorities change, and to develop high quality while you're working quickly. So it's great for you to be able to transition from academia if you have an open mind in this environment and just ask questions, because it is truly the intersection of science, medicine, business, where at the end of the day, we're running a business, but this is science and we need to communicate that accurately and make sure physicians understand the clinical benefit of the drug itself, and patients. And I don't want to forget patients. So you are doing communications for potentially a physician to talk to a patient, or you might be doing an advisory board meeting with patients so they can inform a pharmaceutical company on a particular study. So there are different ways that you can engage in patients. It's not a huge norm in the industry, but it is becoming more common to involve patients in medical communications. Oh, okay, next slide, please. So a successful medical writer, these are candidates. And this is what I meant here when I'm interviewing and I'm looking at candidates coming in with their backgrounds. Even though you're coming from academia, I do want to see certain things in that you did a postdoc, you published, you participated in internships, you did different extracurricular activities, you did some writing exercises, you showed up and you prepared for that interview, you have that willingness to learn, you worked as part of a team, they're asking questions in an interview, they seem pretty driven and they're just eager to be creative and to understand the strategic environment. And all of those qualities, you're not just looking at their academic background and what the GPA was. You're really looking at the whole individual. And I know you could probably say that applies to every potential career, but it's so important to know how a person communicates and manages stress and be able to really work well as a team. And you have to be able to interview candidates and make sure you're looking at their behaviors at the same time, because it can be a tough environment and we want to make sure that everyone succeeds. Okay, next slide. This is one slide that I love because that you could, yes. So that's, it is definitely my intention. And over the years, having been a part of training for developing training materials for medical writers, that they progress to become scientific directors, senior scientific directors, and beyond. So it is important that the skills that you develop as a medical writer, being that detail-oriented and communication skills and multitasking, that you continue to progress beyond that to become a leader in the field. And so scientific directors are now these individuals who can work more closely with clients. They're not developing necessarily outputs on a day-to-day basis, but they value that quality leadership and communication, and they mentor and manage others. So there is a process, there is a development curve. I just want you to see that it's expected that an individual is going to grow from one level to the next. And I do want to point out that there are regulatory writers. So for example, Parexel, where I recently worked, there is a medical writing team that does regulatory writing. Now that's different from medical communication. So if you have any questions about that after, let me know. I'm referring to the growth of individuals in medical communications. But the reason why I bring that up is because in regulatory writing, there are some companies like Parexel that have the title of medical writer for those particular writers. But regulatory writing, as you know, is developing the CSR based on the clinical data, developing the protocol, and so forth. So very different here. This output is taking the clinical data and developing publications or promotional content based on the science. So, okay, next slide, please. So as a scientific director, as I mentioned, they are contributing to making sure that team is succeeding. They're managing those writers. They're making sure the team is following practices, standard practices consistently. They understand the strategic objectives of a client, and they're making sure that that's incorporated into every piece. Because once the client has decided that this is the drug I'm going to focus on, this is the indication this drug is going to have, we have the clinical data, the writer needs to know all of that data, and so does the scientific director. And the scientific director may be managing maybe 5+ writers. And so you have to keep that objective of the client in mind and ensure consistency from every single output across every single writer. And you've learned to do that as a medical writer, so a scientific director should know what it takes to maintain that consistency and to be able to communicate with clients and to travel to meetings and represent the pharmaceutical company and to continue to grow as well. And I will say for myself, at this stage, I progressed from a medical writer to a scientific director. And for me personally, early in my career, then I was tapped on the shoulder to go into the management route. But there are different opportunities for individuals who are coming into this field. And I believe that's the next slide. Yes. So there are other roles. If you want to come into this field and you may not like actually developing the content materials or liaising with clients, communicating with them on site at meetings, maybe you want to be a strategic consultant. So you are making sure that the team is meeting the client objectives and you understand that strategy and you're talking to clients and you're focused on growing the business. You're talking to multiple clients, or you are you're an account director, or you're in business development. So you're focused more on helping to grow the business by making sure the team meets the client's objectives. And at the same time, you're strategic, you're multitasking, but you're focused more on that account as opposed to the science behind every tactic, if that makes sense. Parexel had a scientific strategy advisor role. Some of the companies do that as well, where maybe that person has a scientific background and really wants to focus on strategic imperatives for that brand. They might be talking to the client. They could be loaned out to the client to help the client. They could be talking to the internal team to make sure they're thinking up the strategy, because it might be a very complex type of project. And usually these individuals have many years of experience in the field. And so they've worked on many different projects and they understand what clients want, big and large companies, device companies, a company focused on cancer only or neurology only. So they've worked across different fields and they understand that strategy and they want to help the teams to be successful. And so they can actually help them to think about what they're doing and what should be done when or how. And so those are strategy advisors. So there are different roles in this field. Don't feel that you only have to be a medical writer, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, next slide. So, and then just to highlight again, if you're going into some of these account or business development roles, we tend to joke about these individuals being a little bit more extroverted, in the field. They're very outgoing, very talkative. They want to meet the clients and really understand how things are going. They build that partnership and relationship, and they're equally as important as the scientific team members, because client relationships help to grow the business. Strong relationships ensure that the business grows, and so you want to make sure that you have a good partnership, and again, they contribute to that strong partnership with the client. So next slide. Okay, I actually came to the end. So I'm here at the end, and just quick highlights. So I just want to reiterate with you that it's helpful to really think of this as a career path. But I do recommend for you to have that PhD or postdoctoral training, to have that advanced degree, because it is a strong foundation for a career in medical communications. And it is a rewarding career. If you are able to find a good company, find good clients that you work for, and continue to grow professionally, it is truly rewarding. And agencies and sponsors, they need medical writers to support development of materials for regulatory approval and education about the drug. So just bear in mind, this is an ongoing need, and you can develop different types of outputs depending on whether the drug is approved or not. And medical writers are encouraged to grow into strong leaders through professional development. We want our writers to grow, and anyone in medical communications doesn't have to work in an agency setting. I just should bring this out. They can be an independent consultant. There are a lot of individuals who have their own consulting businesses, and they can either support an agency or they can support the pharmaceutical company directly. So you can build your own career. There's a huge network of freelancers in this business, and they tend to be very successful. So, and I've worked with many over the years. So I hope the takeaway is it's an engaging field. It requires at times, sometimes a bit of a demanding environment to be successful in, but it is definitely doable and can be rewarding after that career. So, and Tiffany, Courtney, that's it for me. So I can pause here if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grover. It was a wealth of information. So thank you so much. I know I was interested in that because I really am into medical communications. Someone did ask in the chat, because you had mentioned CSR. Is that clinical study reports? Is that what that
Yes.
means?
Yes.
Okay, so perfect. So if anybody has any questions, again, you can use the raise your hand feature and you can come off mute or not if you want. It's totally up to you. But I know that I have a few questions, so I don't mind going ahead and jumping in with mine.
Sure.
So my first one, I want to talk about education because I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure most of us in this room don't have a PhD. So are there alternative career paths to that? And if it's not, I'm definitely down for the realistic conversation about that.
Yeah.
Or are there alternative paths in that you start at this entry level position and then have to work your way through departments to get to that? Or is it really that, eventually you're going to have to get this advanced degree if you want to, you know, move on in your career?
I strongly recommend to do that advanced degree, but there are definitely individuals who have done a bachelor's or a master's and have been successful. It just takes years of really working in maybe different environments on many different outputs to gain that expertise and that level of comfort. And what I have
Right.
seen, maybe for some individuals who have a bachelor's background, there's some terms that maybe are too complex for them, or some data sets that might be a little bit too complex. And maybe if they had some more advanced training, they would feel more comfortable with it. But that's not stopping them from really spending the time and getting up to speed and being successful. So you can be successful. It's up to you. You can put your heart and mind to it, but it is challenging when you have so many PhD candidates coming
Right.
in to say if you are going to hire someone with only a master's or a bachelor's degree who might need more training in a particular area. But it has definitely been done. I've definitely seen individuals over the years.
Right, right. So I'm going to follow up with that question for you specifically. So when you received your advanced degree, did you know that you wanted to go into medical writing, or did it kind of fall into your lap? Like, what was your trajectory when you were getting your PhD and then
Yeah.
you obtained it, and how did you kind of get into this part of the industry?
Well, it's funny when I tell you the story. I I really did not know much about the field at all. And even though I was leading the Graduate Student Association at the time, I would bring in people to talk about alternative careers, and someone did talk about medical writing, but it was still more regulatory type of writing. It still wasn't medical communications. It was truly just exploring what was out there, doing a lot of searches myself. Um, but I have to tell you, I don't think I was then as savvy as maybe some of the younger individuals now in the industry who over the years just directly reached out to me through LinkedIn. LinkedIn was wonderful once it got up and running and great.
Told you all about LinkedIn. If you ever listen to
Yes, it
me,
is it is
Danielle, Courtney's.
phenomenal. You really A lot of people over the years just reached out and said, Dr. Groh, can you review my resume? Can you tell me what I need to do to get into this field? And I can tell you how many people over the years have really taken advantage of that. So if you're curious, I recommend looking at a company, doing some research. You can reach out to me. And then if you find a company that you think you're interested in, you can find someone on LinkedIn there and just, connect with them and get their thoughts. I think it's the kind of environment now in this world where people should feel comfortable doing that and take advantage of that.
That's great. That's very inspiring news. So for any of you out there, again, I will just repeat what Dr. Groh has said and what Danielle has said and myself have said many times. I'm sure Courtney too. LinkedIn is going to be your friend when it comes to networking. And the only way you're really going to know how to get into these other areas that you may not know about is to ask, right? And so someone like Dr. Groh, and most people are receptive, right? If they have the knowledge and the experience, many are receptive if you do your part. You can't just come and say, oh, I want to get this job. How can I do that? Right.
Right.
But if you come to someone like Dr. Groh and, say, I'm really interested in it. So she doesn't know she's getting an email from me later. But, when you send those kind of emails, you get some feedback. We do have a question in the chat
Yeah.
I want to ask. And then, Courtney, I'm going to let you take over for any questions you have. I told you all I'm interested in this, so I could talk all day. So Alin asked the question, if you don't have formal writing experience, what type of writing examples could you provide someone to show your writing ability?
Yes. Now, if you don't have formal samples or have not been in a PhD program where you've done your own publications, then I would recommend to do a certificate program, for example, with American Medical Writers Association. And so you can, through that certificate program, you can learn effective writing skills. So at least you've had that exposure to what is needed to do that type of writing. And then maybe you can reach out to an independent consultant. There are consultants on LinkedIn as well who do medical writing. They can provide some training. They can, maybe you can even do a project with them just to get that exposure. But you want to get some of that exposure. And there are different ways that instead of doing a specific degree, I think I've seen some individuals in the past who have reached out to a publishing company. They've been trained in editing. They were helping that company but they got training. I've seen some postdocs who have done that just to get exposure, and that's good as well. So anything that you can do to get some of that exposure. Maybe you wrote some articles for social media. You want to get any type of writing exposure that you can. But training like that certificate program from AMWA is good as well.
Yes, that's a very good one. American Medical Writers Association, I got it in the chat. They offer certificate programs as well. With increasing information and responsibilities of things that you will be doing as a medical writer. I had started that and I expired, but it's fine. So there are also some other questions in here. Courtney, do you want to take it over? I can keep asking, or you can take over the questions in the chat.
I can take over the questions in the chat.
Sure.
Yeah, Amelia is asking, is writing a clinical evaluation report a regulatory writing or medical communications? What would you consider that?
Regulatory, or yes. So,
regulatory, but still within the path of medical communication type.
Well, when you tend to, there is a differentiation between the regulatory type of documents and true medical communications. Because when you think about medical communications, the clinical data are coming to you from that trial. The database is locked. It's now coming to you, and you're going to put that into a format that's going to potentially be published or out in the public space. So you're not doing an internal document for the pharmaceutical company. You are now trying to get it into the public space, into the hands of any physician, whether it's a publication or it's a training deck. That is more of the focus of medical communications.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. And then the last question that we have so far from Celine is, with so many avenues, what is one of the entry-level roles you can begin your career in communication, medical communications, excuse me?
Yes. So some companies have an associate medical writer, and that is truly someone who has no experience in the industry. And they do have internship programs as well. So look at companies that have that. Or other companies, it would be a medical writer. So a few companies started having these internship programs, and they created that title of associate medical writer. And the terminology at other companies is also scientific writer. So those are typically, and they'll tell you those are the entry level positions. But I highly encourage to look at companies that have an internship as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Groh. The presentation was great. You covered every single topic that we wanted to cover. And I'm like, oh my, I'm going down our list here. I'm like, okay, yeah, we covered that. Okay. It is so amazing to just hear about how medical communications reaches the world, essentially. And so this is, every role in clinical research is important, but this one is truly, truly, truly important, because this is the information that gets out to people who really, for them to understand what we're doing. And so I appreciate your work. I appreciate the work that you will have and you will do in the future. And I appreciate you being a part of our mentor program.
Okay.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I just, maybe
that's
be a part of it if you have some time,
That would be wonderful. I really truly believe in mentorship. So I really hope I can help the group in any way possible.
Oh, great,
It's
great, great. Awesome. I'll be reaching out.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna get like a barrage of emails tonight. So I hope you have some coffee and all those things ready. I do have a general question that I want to ask, and I know that this is something that's just been increasingly happening. One of the reasons that Danielle created Black Women in Clinical Research is because there wasn't this space where there were many people that were being represented in
Yeah.
the same space. And that's kind of across the board, not just people of color that are women, but across the board, all genders. So do you see this as just part of a broader disparity, or do you think that because I this is just me asking and a comment, I feel like as a comment that there aren't many people of color who have advanced degrees, or getting it is kind of a daunting task.
Yes.
And so is that part of why maybe in this particular field of medical communications that there aren't many many people represented, or what does that landscape look like that you see as you've been in this career?
You are absolutely right. So Tiffany, it is, and I've spoken to Danielle about this. Along the way in my career, I'm typically the only person of color in a room. And with clients, with whatever company, it's been a journey personally for me to be able to step into that room and know that someone isn't going to doubt my abilities, or they want to know, why do I have this accent, or where am I from? And instead
Right.
of your scientific abilities. And there is just a true lack of representation in medical communications. And I think as well, it is sad now that PhD programs are much smaller than they used to be. You just don't get funding as you did in the past. So you have less people doing PhDs.
Right.
And whereas you had maybe one or two minorities who were part of that group, you really don't have any. And so there are less and less individuals of color who are in this medical communications field. And I really believe we need to support each other, because you need exposure to training, you need colleagues who are in the field. I want to make sure that people can communicate and feel that they are welcome and they belong. And it's very hard because you don't really have that supportive network. And I think it's important that individuals, if they connect with you as a group as well, it's wonderful if they have that opportunity, because I can tell you, if I've met as many as 5 individuals over my almost 20 years in
Right.
this industry, and it's not a number that I like. I want that to be higher, and hopefully this can continue to grow with groups such as yourself. So
Right. I think having events like this, because I've literally never, I think I can count on my 5 fingers right here, people that I've met, just me in my career in medical communications. So I've always wanted to do that. But I think having events like this and showing representation that we do exist, albeit not minute. So thank you again for taking your time, sharing your experience, and presenting this information to us in a way that's digestible and not where it's just going like over our head or even being discouraging. Right. I think all of us in this room, I know all of us in this room are smart individuals. We all believe in the work that we do. We all believe in clinical research. And so if Dr. Grow can be an example of what we all can attain in this career of ours, I think this evening will have been worth it. And so thank you for taking the time. We have pretty much a minute or less than a minute, and I know everyone's time is valuable. So I want to take this time to thank you on behalf of Black Women in Clinical Research and for this career talk. Courtney, you can definitely have the last word. I know I talk a lot. I think
No,
Amelia has a
no.
question. You have a question, Amelia? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, I said, no, no, no. I don't need the last word. I don't need it.
Sorry, I wanted to say something to what the doctor was saying. So the company I was working with actually got an opportunity to work in medical communications, and I was moved to medical writing, and it was a very unpleasant experience for me because there was no training given, and in fact, I actually just lost the job because the manager kind of there wasn't, like you said, there's not a lot of representations. It was just me. So all I did was just kept trying to prove myself, kept trying to prove my, like my intelligence and all of that. And, eventually got put on a performance improvement plan and then got let go eventually. So it was interesting because it felt like it was a very monopolized field. And it felt like there was only a certain kind of face that was needed there. So that's why I joined this, because I just wanted to hear the experience if it's different somewhere else, because that was not a pleasant experience. That's why I joined this meeting today. I was in that role for 2 years. So,
Amelia,
yes.
I completely understand. And I've been through many circumstances, and it is hard. And I have to say, being a person of faith, that is what has kept me going for many years. And it is a test of your self-confidence. And I hope that there could be exposure to training. So if you need help in a particular area, that you don't have to go to an organization and pay a lot of money to get that training. You could come to your peers and be exposed to that. And that is what is lacking, because from the very moment that you step into the room, you are being judged. Unfortunately, in this field, it is an area where how you present yourself and how you communicate with the client becomes top of mind before the individual, before looking at that individual. And it's an area where sometimes it can become very challenging. But at the same time, and my belief is that you learn from these environments and you move forward. So even if you went through that process yourself, just take what it has taught you and move forward, because resilience is extremely important in this field, particularly in any medical field. But because of all the skills, you need all the skills, hard and soft, to succeed here. You tend to have individuals who are constantly assessing how well you're doing. And so I can only say, use that to drive you forward. And that would just be my advice. So learn from this experience and let's move forward and find a better company. Not every company is a good fit for you. So find a better environment.
Thank you so much, because I was just going to walk away completely from medical communications, but this meeting sort of opened my eyes, and because all I thought it was just regulatory writing, because that's all I did. And I wanted to offer because I'm a trained foreign ND. I wanted to offer that training, but I felt like my scientific expression was truncated in that way. I wasn't exposed to a lot of scientific writing, and I thought that was what I was going to be doing, but I ended up doing a lot of regulatory work, regulatory writing, working regulatory bodies, that sort of thing. So that was my own experience, and I just thought that was medical communications, and I just hated it. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to walk away from it, because I thought I was going to be doing posters. I thought I was going to be doing presentations. I thought I was going to be working with, MSLs, like all of that stuff that you said. I thought I was going to do all of that, but I was only assigned regulatory work and then judged basically based on that. So thank you so much.
Yes, find another company and really do traditional medcoms, and don't do the regulatory, because I think you've seen that that's not what you enjoy. So take a look at the more creative type of content, and you might really have progress from there. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing that story too, Amelia. I think anyone who shares their story and experience, and again, you're not alone. I'm pretty sure all of us in this room probably had some experience where we were given a role and we weren't doing that. And I think because a lot of times, and this is just women across the board, we tend to take on more than we want to because we don't want to lose a position that we have. And so even though we know in our mind, like, well, this isn't medical communications. And I think someone asked earlier, is this regulatory experience part of medical communications? And I'm someone who did regulatory for 20 years, and it's not, right? It's part of it, but it's a small piece of what medical communications does, which is why Dr. Groh gave us such great information to kind of differentiate what the differences are. And so, Amelia, please don't give up on that if that's what you really enjoy. To find that space for you, like Dr. Groh said, in a company that supports that. right, and that career trajectory for you.
Absolutely.
So it's 8:05 now, and Dr. Gross is going to charge me. I can only pay her in thank yous and blessings. So with that, Dr. Grow, again, thank you so much. I don't want to
Thank
take
you.
any more of your time. Courtney, thank you again so much for co-hosting with
Thank you, Tiffany.
you are the bomb. Thank you, Danielle, for creating this space for people like us who want to kind of go into these careers, and make sure you all come next month because there'll be more. And also, last thing, don't forget about the Black Women in Clinical Research second annual national conference that's going to be happening November 8th through the 10th in Atlanta. I was told to stop saying Hot Atlanta, but I will never stop saying it. I don't care. Make sure you all go to that. So again, thank you. I'm going to just hang out for a little bit. Dr. Gross, you're definitely welcome to leave if you have things you need to do. Everybody has their own life. Otherwise, drop in the chat if you have LinkedIn or anything like that, and make sure that you definitely connect with Dr. Grow on LinkedIn.
Yes. Thank you all again. Wish you all well, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions.